Hello.
Chat, I want to see an
what's
entire
up?
ocean of woofs.
Hey, how's it
Load
going?
them now.
Pretty good. How you
Woof,
doing?
woof, woof, and
Yeah, not bad,
777
thanks.
6 5
Thanks
4
for having me
3
back
2
on.
1 woof.
For people who don't know, which is probably almost everyone, my name's Laurie Pycroft. I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Oxford, and I was on last week
Oh
to
yeah.
speak about
We talked about the effect of
altruism.
altruism. Yeah, and then my
Yeah,
internet
yeah,
was super fucked, so we got cut off a lot. Gotcha.
yeah. But before we get to that, just like that last guy, his COVID takes, I think, gave me brain cancer, and this is my area of expertise, brains. So like I can state that quite confidently, particularly in terms of just the radical overconfidence about very, very preliminary results. And this is something that's been like widespread problem. Well, it's widespread problem in like scientific reporting in general, but particularly with coronavirus, is the fact that a normal scientific study looking into off-label usage, novel usage for a certain drug, takes maybe like 1 to 5 years to, well, probably not 5 years for something that's already been through that process, but several years to actually do the clinical study. Then a few months of writing up, then maybe 6 months between sending the paper off and getting it back from various rounds of peer review and so forth. And even then, we're relying on multiple studies gathered up into meta-analyses. And in this instance, we just haven't had the time to do all of that. And some of those stages you can reasonably bring down. You can test a lot more people rather than testing people over time. A lot more people at once. We can do peer review quicker. We can stay up all night and write papers very quickly. But this still takes a lot of time, and the fact that it's being compressed so much at the moment means that we're probably introducing a lot of errors. Now, that's understandable, and we've got to do the research, obviously.
Yeah.
But especially now, every single result should be taken very, very cautiously. And
do you know where we're at right now for hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine or whatever it's called, in terms of like its efficacy for treating COVID-19 or any of the like related symptoms?
So I would preface this very much by saying this isn't my area of specialty. I'm not an infectious disease guy, nor molecular biology or anything like that. So not my area of expertise. But as far as I'm aware, like there's a few studies with relatively small sample sizes that indicate that it might be effective, maybe, in humans. And then there's a few lab studies that indicate that maybe it kills COVID or is effective at dealing with the immune response of COVID in vitro, in petri dishes, which is fine. But a handgun kills cancer cells in a petri dish. Like the fact is that doesn't provide really strong evidence. It provides evidence that it might work, but there are so many things going on between like absorbing the drug, distributing it, and metabolizing it before it actually gets to the site to do the thing that it's supposed to be doing. So it's maybe promising. It's one of quite a few drugs that appropriately enough clinicians are looking into. But even if it is promising, and the evidence is still way too early to say that, even if it is promising, we don't have a clue of what sort of dosage to use it at, how long they need to take it for, what things to use in combination. And these are certainly all things that are being investigated, and there might be some good results in the coming months. But right now, it's hugely irresponsible, obviously, for Trump to make these statements. And though this is straying even further from my field of expertise, I saw a Washington Post letter to the editor yesterday indicating that it's probably illegal for him to be doing this, because advertising a drug, even if you're not financially benefiting, advertising a drug for its off-label use, i.e. things that it's not clinically proven for, is a breach of legislation cooked up in the 1920s, I think, to deal with like snake oil salesmen. Appropriate enough, because Trump did literally sell vitamin pills like based on a fake urine test thing, so he's a literal snake oil salesman.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Where were we at when we were getting cut off for our EA talk?
Sure, yeah. So I think we were talking a bit about democracy and stuff, but the thing I've been thinking about a bit this week is you did also ask what sort of things can someone in your position, a prominent Twitch streamer, do to further these ideas or get more into effective altruism, or just kind of spread the word that mosquitoes are bastards and need to be killed. And so I've got 4 kind of main areas that I think would be valuable, if you wouldn't mind like running through them. It's not a huge list.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So first of all, this is fairly obvious, but discussing effective altruism related topics. You probably already, well, I know you already agree with several of them. Things like open borders, there's a lot of evidence, obviously, that it's going to improve welfare and, have massive economic benefits, blah, blah, blah. Advocating for that, or at least for better immigration policy, is probably a good thing. And exposing, particularly right-wing arguments to scrutiny. Criminal justice reform you already agree with. But the 2 that I'm not sure of your position on, and I certainly haven't seen you like playing up that much, is risk management policy. So particularly things like nuclear security, very big worry with Trump. Risks of emerging technologies, preparedness for pandemics, obviously very relevant at the moment. These are things that don't get discussed that much in the public sphere because they're generally not that sexy, and who cares about nuclear war? It hasn't been a risk since the Cold War ended, which is obviously not true, but is kind of popular take. And so I think giving a higher platform to some of these policies or policy discussions, that there's not necessarily an easy way to directly donate to charity and improve the situation, but nevertheless you can use your time, your platform, your reach to spread good memes about these risks and about the ways that potentially we can put the pressure on policymakers in order to reduce the risk of us all dying in an engineered pandemic that's 1,000 times worse than COVID or something. Not that COVID's not very bad, but it could be a lot worse.
In a funny way, this kind of ties into my fuck democracy argument. I don't know if I know you've heard these before. Maybe you have. There was a really good paper that I read about how humans view risk way differently. I think it's the difference between if you had something to gain versus something to lose. That like if you could gamble like $100 to win $1,000, even if the odds were bad, I think like people would do it. But if you could gamble to gain does anybody in chat remember the paper that I'm citing? It had to do like if you could lose
aversion.
It was some we were doing a lot of like behavioral economics, loss aversion. Yeah, it might have been what it was called. Yeah. It had to do with like people will shy away from really good trades if there's loss involved, but like they'll pursue like greedy things if on the flip side or something weird like that. When it comes to managing upsides or downsides for risk, this was a conversation that I had with somebody a while back that dramatically changed the way that I viewed it. So I personally, I don't buy health insurance because I view myself as like a low risk person. Like, why would I waste the money on it? And then I had a conversation with somebody who actually, he changed my mind on it. I don't have any right now because I wasn't too lazy to get it. But like his argument was basically that the downside, or rather like, the downside for buying insurance and no bad event happening was that you don't really have like a big loss suffered because you pay for health insurance, like $200 a month for you.
You're losing 10% of your income or something
Not even.
like that.
It's way less than that. Well, yeah.
Overestimating. I don't know why.
Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. But yeah, it's way less than that. I mean, well, I'll compare it like on the scale of the United States, like a pandemic response is probably going to be like a fraction of our actual budget, even the discretionary spending part.
Oh, precisely, yeah. The CDC's pandemic preparedness section has, a tiny budget, and to be honest, most of the effective like anti-pandemic work is under foreign aid in other areas. So things like just improving health monitoring in developing nations, so that we can identify these spreads quicker. But sorry,
but just that basically like the downside for preparing for something like this and nothing happening is like trivial.
Yeah,
and the upside. There could be upsides even if nothing bad does happen, that like maybe additional research, yields you some insight or something, blah, 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 blah. But that if we go into the other side where a disaster case does happen, the upside for preparing becomes massive that like you save yourself so much by being prepared for one of these like black swan events, right? But the downside for not being prepared is also tremendous. That like by not being prepared, you fucked yourself really hard. So like from a risk assessment point of view, it makes sense to like dump a little bit of money into these like pet projects, we can call them even, because it's not really a big fraction of your overall budget. And on the off chance that something does happen, like you've averted so much disaster by just being ready for something like this that, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Though, of course, we do need to be careful of the kind of the inverse. Are you familiar with Pascal's mugging?
I've heard of Pascal's wager. I didn't know the guy got mugged. What's his mugging? Go for it.
So the idea is I come up to you in the street, or not me, because I like to be an ethical person, blah, blah, but I come up to you in the street, pull out a gun and pull out sorry, not a gun, pull out my cell phone. And show you a little app saying, do you want to destroy the world? And it's got a button on it. And I say, if you don't give me $100, I'm going to press this button. And it's linked up to a massive network. It's linked up to the Russian dead hand system. It's going to set up a bunch of thermonuclear weapons, destroy the world, blah, blah. It's only $100. And though you can reasonably rate the probability of my lying as quite high, you know, $100 versus a chance.
The downside is the destruction of humankind. Yeah.
So, you know, prima facie, maybe we say, okay, give the guy $100 because the downside is so massive. You know, not only the destruction of 7.7 billion lives, but the loss of all potential future human lives. But if you did that every time someone says, "Here's my crackpot idea, give me money for it," then you're going to run out of money pretty quickly. So there does still need to be some kind of prioritization, though in this case, I would certainly argue that, you know, nuclear security, dealing with emergency technologies, and particularly pandemics are very much worth it. But we still need to be careful of that little.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Although I think we're way on the other side of that right now. We're not in an area where we're over-preparing for all of this, yeah.
No, I absolutely agree in this instance. And, you know, it's not even like it would have cost that much more money to get a substantially better response. The what was the Global Pandemic Security Board, the Global Biosecurity something or other, that the Obama administration set up, had a really quite detailed plan for dealing with exactly this sort of scenario, primarily in terms of flu risk, but, you know, very similar. Undertaking with a pretty much step-by-step guide of how to walk through this, and the Trump administration's effectively torn this up somewhat metaphorically. You know, they've shuffled around the department, they've made it hugely difficult for them to get anything done. They've cut overall CDC budget, and it wouldn't have even taken any extra effort. You know, the marginal effort would have been literally zero.
Yeah.
It's taken more effort to bring it in, and yet we're in this terrible situation. The US is. The UK is doing a little bit better, but not hugely.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I disagree in terms of like, yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, bringing it back around to the kind of ideas to discuss. I think those kind of topics. I haven't heard this conversation you were having about the kind of the fat tail risk the other day, but that sounds like exactly the kind of thing we need to be talking about. Then there's also kind of foreign aid, international development, that kind of thing. I haven't heard all your work. I've been kind of marathoning some of your debates recently, but, you know,
Sure.
haven't heard all your stuff. But I haven't heard you talk very much about advocating specifically for like international development. I hear you talk a lot about capitalism as a driver for improving people's lives, which I completely agree with. I think you can attribute a very substantial portion of the economic growth and growth in quality of life across the world to, if not capitalism or free markets, then, you know, market-based systems and free trade and all that kind of stuff. But there's quite good evidence to indicate that in many instances, government aid to targeted interventions has massive positive impact in terms of lives in the developing world that can then have many economic benefits. You know, when people are able to, you know, walk to get water or walk to get educated or whatever, instead of lying in bed dying of malaria,
Yeah.
you know, they tend to do a lot better. So for example, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS relief, which George W. Bush implemented. Not a fan of the guy, but this makes me sometimes argue that he was one of the best presidents, at least in terms of purely kind of consequentialist outcomes. The US has spent, I think, about 80 billion over the lifespan of this program. So far, it's still going. Both Obama and Trump have reauthorized it, though I think Trump has cut some. I don't remember that. Don't take me on that. But it's cost about $80 billion, which is obviously a lot of money. But it saved something on the order of, or averted the death of something on the order of 17 million people. We're talking like way over 10 million, absolutely certain. And so you're talking about, sub $10,000 per life saved. If you compare that to the value of statistical life, so this is the value that, say, the U.S. Transportation Safety Administration, or the TSA is probably a bad example, but generally the federal government and policymakers will use to determine whether it's worth averting a life or not. How much can you pay to upgrade a road so that people don't die? If it's more than 10 million per person, you're probably not going to do it.
Sure.
The statistical life value is about $10 million. Obviously there are cheaper interventions, but talking like 3 orders of magnitude difference between what the US government is willing to pay for, most Western governments are willing to pay for saving one of their citizens, versus what they can pay for the highest impact interventions, at least, to save people in the developing world.
Yeah. I mean, that's not surprising, right? The argument being that, like, it's our budget, it's our money, like, we should be more concerned with our own citizens versus, like, another country's citizens, right?
Sure, yeah, I don't know if I find that argument super convincing. I think I'm not sure, are you arguing that personally there, or that's a point people make?
I think I would argue it personally. I think that, like, well, assuming all else is equal, like if I could spend $10,000 to save, 10 African people versus $10,000 to save 10 USA citizens, I'd probably want to spend it at home instead. I think all else equal. When those numbers become super imbalanced, then things become more questionable, right? Like if we're spending like $30 million on highly, experimental treatments to save, a couple American lives versus that same money invested elsewhere could save tons and tons of lives overseas, is probably different, right? Sorry, do you disagree with anything there? Or?
Not necessarily. So I think, like, obviously my ideal utopian government, we would be completely neutral on that, but I think one can make a reasonable argument about people within a nation having a better claim on the money because they paid into the pot, something like that. I'll certainly take that for the point of argument. But I guess what the question becomes is how big a difference that makes. So say we're willing to spend, $1 million to save an American life. If we can save a foreign life for 500,000, is that worth it? For 100,000, for 5,000,
Yeah, whereas the scale is really hard to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not sure where I would put that. Do you have any kind of thoughts about?
I don't, but it's something that I've thought about a lot. Actually, and I can even think about it like domestically. Healthcare rationing is an interesting concept to think about. Like, end-of-life care for senior citizens is incredibly expensive, at least in the United States. There's so many more machines, so many more treatments, so many more surgeries. Everything is higher risk. Everything has more complications. Like, you might spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe getting an extra year, and it's not even like a good quality year of life out of an elderly person. Whereas that same amount of money might have dramatically improved the lives, maybe given to kids with like scoliosis for early treatment or something, like some early intervention that could dramatically improve the lives of like multiple children. So like stuff like that is stuff that I think about. Like, is it morally right to spend so much money intervening on behalf of getting another 6 to 18 months more for grandma, when there are younger people that could do so much more with that same capital invested, I guess, in terms of like extending like healthy lifespan? I'm not sure. I don't have any strong feelings about any of it. But it's definitely like I could be moved in a lot of different ways in that conversation because I could see it going either way.
So I think I would, assuming I'll buy that for equal costs, it's better to go within one's own nation or country, or whatever we say. I think the ratio probably shouldn't be that great, and certainly not as much as it implicitly is with current policy. So the UN has a target for developed nations to give in international aid, which is 0.7% of gross national income. And that's tiny. If you ask people consistently in polls in both the US and UK, how much do you think we spend on foreign aid? They're giving
Like
multiple
10 or 20% or something.
yeah, exactly. And just the tiny quantity then there, when the expected value of it is so massive, and especially when we're willing to spend money on pensions that are, well, actually, I won't go into any specific policies because I don't know economics well enough. I don't want to start a debate with you on that. But on things that we can generally agree in pure utilitarian terms are far less impactful. When we get to within like an order of magnitude, then I think there's a debate to be had about when to stop. But until we get to there, when we're talking about multiple orders of magnitude different in impact per dollar, I think it's one of the greatest failings of kind of liberal democracy as an ideal. And I'm a big fan of liberal democracy, so like it's
I don't know. Ironically, I guess, because you were asking me because I was the one with all the problems here. I wouldn't argue. I don't think this is a problem with liberal democracy. I think it's just a difference of how people tend to value things in proximity to them, whether it's proximity in identity or actual physical proximity. Like if I had the opportunity to provide for like a good holiday, like a good Christmas for my son, but with that same money, I could provide like a good Christmas for two different families. I don't think anybody would ever say like, oh, okay, yeah, screw my kid. I'm going to provide for two other families instead. I don't think anybody's ever making that choice, whether it's in a socially planned economy or whether it's in like a free market democracy, liberal democracy, or whatever. I think people tend to have like a proximal like value to the lives that they interact with, which probably isn't entirely unreasonable.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that in and of its, well, I guess I do have a problem with it idealistically, but it's also something that seems to be pretty fundamental about human nature, and it's something I do. I'm speaking to you on a reasonably nice computer. If I had gotten the shittiest computer possible, I might have been able to save most of a human life by donating it to the most impactful causes.
Yeah. You run into like the like that, is it Peter Singer's cup of coffee argument or whatever?
Yeah. I find Singer's arguments very interesting, although I disagree with him sort of on a lot of the animal rights stuff.
Sure.
But
Well, that's actually another thing that is really hard for me to compute as well. And I to be fair, I can get away with this because I'm pretty emotionally detached from most things. But something back when I like was more like, I guess I used to be angry a lot more, but I've kind of mellowed out a bit. But something that used to make me angry actually was people taking their animals to the vets. People would take an animal to a vet and spend sometimes more than $1,000 on like surgery for like their 16-year-old dog or cat. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, it's crazy to me that like we're driving by homeless people on the street so that you can spend thousands of dollars on your animal that's going to die in a year or two. Like that kind of stuff used to like make me like really upset. I just don't care about as much about anything anymore. But like, I remember I asked you at the beginning of our conversation a few days ago, I was like, I'm curious, how do you feel about donating to animal charities? Because that's still something that I kind of like look sideways at, where it's like, it's interesting that so much money can go towards like saving animals. And then like I live in LA and Jesus fuck, the like homeless tent cities around here are insane. Yeah.
So I think on that point, to some degree, we're kind of talking about what should we do with our utils? What should we do to have the greatest impact we can, versus what can we do for warm fuzzies? What can we do to just make ourselves feel better? And presumably you're not gonna like, I'm not saying you would have a go at someone spending money on their cat or dog now, but presumably you're not going to have a go at someone for buying some fancy trainers or something like that. Sorry, sneakers.
Wait, are you asking me if I would, or are you?
Yeah, would you have a go at someone for buying some fancy sneakers?
Oh yeah, I mean like, then that's why I kind of dropped thinking that argument, because depending on how far you want to run that back, like basically every single, oh fuck, whose thought experiment is this? I don't think this is a Peter Singer one, or it might be. Have you heard the one with the kid who falls into the fountain and you can ruin a pair of pants?
Yeah, this is I can't remember whether Singer actually originated or whether it was Toby Ord. Uh, I know both of them. Well, I say know them like I've met Singer a few times. I don't, I'm not friends with him or anything.
Sure.
But uh, but yeah, Singer certainly promotes it a lot. The drowning child in the pond argument.
Yeah, that basically, for people that don't know, if you're going to work and you had the opportunity to go into a fountain and save a drowning child, would you do it? But if you do it, you're going to lose a pair of $20 or $50 pants. It's going to happen. They're going to be gone forever. You can't clean them or whatever. They're just going to be fucked. Maybe the water is dyed red or something, and your pants will be. You're in the Crips part of town, and you can't wear those colors. I don't know. So whatever.
You don't have time to take them off. And
Yeah, you can't do
we're
anything.
in a logic puzzle.
Yeah. It's a logic puzzle. It's a frictionless, like purely logical, vacuum.
Spherical child.
Yeah, so everybody says yes to that, of course. Obviously, I would step into the fountain to save the child. Like, obviously. Well, what if you go there the second day and he's there? Now, 95% of people will say yes. 5% of people are like, okay, fuck, I see where we're going with this. Because eventually I'm going to say every single day you go into work, would you save the child every single time, knowing every single time you had to, throw away a pair of pants? And eventually somebody will either say, yeah, I would do it forever, or no, I would stop after some arbitrary amount of time. But if you would do it forever, then, well, why don't you right now donate money to starving children? Like, why did you go to Starbucks this morning and buy a $9 cup of coffee or whatever when you could have donated that to some African foundation? Like, you could be saving lives with every single purchase you make if you were living as like a perfect utility machine, but you clearly don't do that. So how do you explain that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a really difficult one, both from a kind of practical perspective and a sort of mental health perspective, because if you're getting into these sort of ideas and you're thinking seriously about how little it really costs to help a lot of people around the world, you can go into this kind of spiral of, oh God, I can't have a coffee. I have to make my own at home. No wait, making coffee is too expensive. I'll take caffeine pills. No wait, I'll halve them and snort them because that gets more effect for the buck. And yeah, you get into these weird optimizations where you're just trying to earn the most money to.
We're not trying to be immoral. Yeah, because basically every single purchase you make at that point, like every time you buy a new video game, there's like an African kid staring at you dying of malaria, wondering why you're not giving him money instead. And it's like, exactly. Holy shit, I feel horrible. Yeah.
So personally, the way I kind of deal with this is I've taken the Giving Pledge. So if people want to Google it, it's basically a pledge that I have promised to give at least 10% of my income over the course of my life to high impact charities. So I think 10%, both from a kind of societal normative perspective, it's something Christianity does, it's a nice round number, makes sense as a affordable but still substantial portion of income, and it's achievable. Obviously, the more you give, the better. And I would personally encourage people to give as much as they're kind of comfortable with to the best causes. But there definitely comes a point at which, if you don't stop worrying and obsessing about every single moment of someone else's life you can save, your life's going to be bad. Your creativity and output and so forth is going to be bad. And ultimately we get back to the kind of egoism thing we were mentioning earlier, where if I say I can give 10 African kids a great day at Disneyland, or you can give your kid a great day at Disneyland, obviously you're going to choose your kid. If you can if I could choose between me getting shot or 3 random people I've never met getting shot, I'm going to choose the 3 random people. I'm not going to feel great about it, but I'll do it. But yeah, so I guess it comes down to what kind of scale of impact are you willing to accept, and how much cognitive dissonance you want to experience, because these arguments all apply to people who don't donate anything.
Yeah.
And not that I'm saying they're like bad people or anything, but once you're aware that there's this massive disparity in how much impact you can have, I guess your kind of 3 broad options are: go, fuck it, I don't care, just never help anyone else outside of your sort of social circle unless it vaguely feels good. I'm going to self-sacrifice myself and ruin my life. Or some kind of healthy medium where you say, I don't want to give everything. I still have obligations to the people I love and to myself to just live an enjoyable life. But if I do give this chunk of my income or advocate for these things or do these activities, then I can substantially improve people's lives. And at the end of the day, you have to just let the the perfect not be the enemy of the good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess moving on to the kind of next broad point. That was just point one. I swear the others are a bit speedier.
Sure. Yeah,
Sorry.
go for it.
So second one is very straightforward. Just invite on experts. So I very much appreciate your having me on, but I'm not an expert in ethics. I've published a couple of papers vaguely adjacent, collaborating with ethicists, but I'm not one myself. I'm not in international development. I'm not in epidemiology, etc., etc. So getting some of these people involved and just chatting with them like we are, or having a debate. I mean, there's a lot of people in the effective altruism community who you will have radically different ideas to, particularly on animal ethics. Ask after someone who wants to pave over the Amazon to stop animal suffering. That's a view within effective altruism, not one I subscribe to, but so there's some wackier ideas that I'm sure you could have fun debates on, but also just give a platform to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I tried to, depending on what's going on. I was going to do a more serious podcast where I was going to bring on experts to talk to, and I had something lined up with one of the local universities around here to talk about healthcare, and then the COVID-19 stuff broke out, so everything got put on hold, but that's not But yeah, I try to have if people want to come on that are experts in a certain field to chat about things, I try to have them on and chat.
So yeah, I'd guess just I'd suggest reaching out to people a bit more then. Although I haven't heard of this podcast you're planning, but I'm sure I'll listen to it when it comes out. It sounds very good, interesting concept.
Yeah.
So the third thing is, oh sorry, were you about to?
Nope. Yeah, no, go for it.
Oh, third thing is regular plugs for high impact charities, effective altruism related articles, books, etc. I see you occasionally, watching videos on your channel, or reading articles and sending out links. Just doing a bit of that in the kind of background or during the stream would be good. I can send you some links now if you'd like to. Three things that I think might be particularly interesting to you and your audience.
Yeah, hit me up. Throw them out.
38 months of
so
subbing.
first of all is
Ye
book
versus
Doing
Pepe.
Good Better by Will MacAskill. It's available on Audible and Amazon and all good bookshops, I'm sure. And it's basically a primer on effective altruism, why we should do good and how to do it better. He's an excellent young philosopher, highly recommended. And I'll just send you 3 links now to a couple of things. So this first one is Future Perfect, a subsection of Vox.com. I'm not always the biggest fan of Vox's other reporting, it's somewhat variable, but this blog is really excellent. They've got some actual experts on effective altruism who talk about a lot of relevant topics from a kind of EA perspective. So that's very, very worth keeping an eye on. Sorry, just opening the links. Second one is Will MacAskill. I mentioned him earlier. If you don't want to read the whole book, he's got a TED Talk that I would highly recommend.
Gotcha.
And finally, those are the Give Well top charities. I think some people in text were linking them last time I was on.
Yeah, the malaria ones,
yeah, very good stuff in there. If anybody is wanting to donate to any cause, highly recommended.
Okay, cool. I'll link these in chat, and then I'll watch these over the next few days.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And finally, fundraising. So I know you've done a few charity streams before, but I haven't seen any of them.
I haven't in quite a while.
Okay, what kind of causes were you focusing on?
I think the big one that we did, this is a long time ago, but it was Doctors Without Borders. And then I jump on other people's streams that are doing charity related stuff, but I haven't ran any of my own in a while.
So I guess that would be really good. You know, you've got a lot of viewers. You seem to be doing well on YouTube. Maybe a kind of cross-platform charity stream. Get the neoliberal subreddit Reddit involved. They'll always shill for, you know, mosquito nets. Maybe like foster some donation-related memes. I'm not sure if they'll be like too forced, but you know, something like donating a bed net every time you get a good dunk on someone during a debate, anything like that. Challenging other prominent streamers to like debates, sponsored game matches, bringing people who donate to EA causes on stream to chat with you, or like pose you questions, anything like that. And yeah, just trying to get more other streamers involved, you know, challenge them on their ideas regarding these topics, hopefully get them a bit more aligned and get their communities donating too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think we've done that in the past. Like competition charities seem to work well when people feel like they're donating against each other. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to malaria charities, you can tie it in pretty effectively with the current COVID-19 crisis. So, like, obviously, the medical situation in the developed world is very bad, but conversely, it's worse literally all the time in many regions due to, you know, malaria, other neglected tropical diseases, and particularly at the moment where you have a big burden on the healthcare system that you don't want, you know, people with malaria taking up hospital beds. And when the WHO late last month issued a advisory warning, this on the 25th, about the importance of ensuring continuity of malaria services. You know, when you've got a whole load of donations flowing towards COVID causes, rightfully so, you know, it's an important issue, you are inevitably going to have a bunch of donations going away from other causes.
Yeah.
And, you know, with how impactful malaria is, it's something to really try to push for at the moment.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I just saw in chat someone saying debate Hassan on charity. Yeah, please do. I would love to watch that.
Wait, is he against charity?
I wouldn't be surprised. I know a lot of like quite hard lefty people who are against charity because they think that it props up existing
Oh no.
societal structures.
That's so
and
dumb.
they
I don't
are...
think there's no way he would have that point of view. I don't think.
Oh no, Destiny. You see it puts down people in the developing world because by letting them be healthy, you are causing imperialism and not accelerating the formation of a worker. I don't fucking know. I'm sure
I've heard these
even
takes before, but I
Faisal
would
is
hope that
fucking...
Hassan, I don't think takes quite the extreme. I've heard these before though.
Well,
but...
I'm not sure then. I haven't heard much of his stuff.
Yeah.
My apologies. I was just reading something in chat.
Oh sure.
I probably
Yeah, I
shouldn't
guess.
read that. But generally there are definitely some lefties out there who would make that take. I have heard them before. And, you know, do you want to be dunking on the most extreme radical lefties? Yeah, perhaps not, but you can probably find someone to argue, or at least argue one of the finer points.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Any other final things or any other things?
No, I think I've stolen enough of your time. Thank you very much for you know, being so lovely and for, you know, chat being nice and everything. And yeah. I haven't got any specifics, but I might be starting streaming soon. If people are vaguely interested, you know, I don't know, link it at some point. It's like a vague ambition, but you've inspired me to kind of get a bit more involved with engaging about important issues. So thank you, and hopefully I won't be shit.
Yeah, cool. Well, good luck, man. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks very much. Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye. You're really invested in this. This is like a really important story to you. If you want, dog, I can give you her Instagram and you can message her and ask herself. You seem to be really concerned.